morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to training for VR counselors and ESO providers on community support services. My name is Sherrina Sewell. I am the district director for the Capital District. I'm here with my partners who have been working tirelessly over the past 2.5 years, along with the wonderfully retired Naomi Aiken, on providing an updated version, guidance, and policy of CSS. I'm going to allow Ashley to introduce herself as well before we get started.
Hi, I'm Ashley Miller. I am a vocational rehab counselor out of the Harrisonburg DARS office. I have nearly 10 years with DARS, and prior to that, I was a job coach for 2 years. So I'm excited to bring some field experience to our conversation today, and I will pass it over to Richard.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. My name is Richard Kriner. I work out of the DARS Central Office, and I manage our Autism Services program as well as our Customized Employment program. And I've been with DARS for almost 25 years, I believe, and working in the field. And I've worked in community-based services and grants and special projects in Central Office. So I kind of bring the central office perspective and have so appreciated working with Ashley, Sherrina, Naomi, and the rest of the team on all of this and having them bring their perspective to ensure we have a quality product for you guys. So with that, I'm going to jump in and begin our training for today. And Ashley, if you could switch the slide for me. All right. So before we begin, I'm gonna just say, hey, yo, don't be silly. Make sure you get everything you need to really enjoy and get the maximum benefit from this training. So stop and make sure that you've already your, familiarize yourself with the information that is in the CSS documents that we have posted to the website. And that includes information on the guidance for the provision of voc rehab and community support services. And that document was revised 7/2024. Then there's also another document you'll find on there, the CSS assessment and plan doc, as well as the report and bill document. If possible, and you have access to it, go ahead and print those off and try to have those right beside you here while you're going through the training. Ashley, next slide, please. All right, so some just real quick snapshot of CSS and kind of its history here with VA DARS. Um, and before I talk about the history, just again, just kind of set the scene, make sure everybody's kind of familiar with what we're talking about. CSS is a service that's intended to address non-vocational areas that impact employability. So it's not the same as supported employment job coaching, but it's something that can be utilized in conjunction with that as a wraparound service that will greatly enhance the other array of employment supports that we can provide our consumers. Um, CSS initially started out in kind of a smaller, more focused usage, and it was a component of our community brain injury case management program. For those of you who've been with the agency for a little while, you'll know Patty Goodall, who had been running that program for years. And she's recently retired, but Patty did a fantastic job. In fact, Virginia's brain injury case management program was known around the country. She was one of the early kind of high achiever states in terms of the case management model and their community clubhouse model. But within that, Patty had created the concept of community support services and was mainly utilizing it as a way to address, again, kind of those wraparound support needs as it related to independent living skills, life skills, adaptive skills, the full range of that. Real dynamic woman, Patty Goodall. So thanks to her for the creation of the service initially. So right around, I want to say it was probably around somewhere between 2009 and 2012. Not sure exactly the date. As I was in a role developing autism services for our state VR agency to enhance the way we worked with that population and take some of what we were learning through research we were doing at the time and do that knowledge translation. One of the services I was familiar with, having worked over in the community support services team for several years and being familiar with what Patty Goodall did, was the CSS, and it was a service that we wanted to take and we wanted to expand out of just that brain injury case management model where it was at. So that was done. Initially, a lot of the work with CSS, once we brought it out as a service that we could purchase for VR clients, it was, for I would say the first 4 years or so, it was more focused on work we were doing with our autism services and then also with brain injury. But eventually, we started to see it expand out to other populations, which was very appropriate, and we found it to be a really good fit. In terms of kind of the guidance and what we had before our team got together and started working, everything had previously been housed over on the DARS website under the brain injury program and the doc repository, because that was, really where that program had been housed for many of years, and we really never, when we moved it over to a service that we could use through the VR program, took and updated any of the policy or set up any structure for our field offices in terms of where we're going to post forms and guidance and everything that would be easier for them to find. So that was a big priority of the work that we did. Um, Also, some of the things when our team got together and we decided to take a look at the service that had been going for, and it was funny, I was doing the math this morning and I was so surprised how long CSS has been a service that we could purchase on the VR side. We're talking 15, 16 years. And it's funny, it's just like time since the pandemic is weird. So it seems just like yesterday to me, like it's still like this new service. So it was a very good thing. It was a very timely thing for us to get together and begin this work. We were looking at ways to take what we were doing with CESS and develop more structure around it, develop more consistency and continuity, oversight and policy to really support the use of CSS, but support it in a way that's effective, efficient, and done with quality. Next slide, please. So again, some of the things would this team, and kind of off the top of my head, Naomi, myself, Ashley, Sherrina, we had Trish Harris, who's was with DBVI, was involved with us early on, as well as some other folks. So again, appreciate to everybody that gave input. But we wanted to look at ways that we could build into those things I mentioned, that structure and that consistency and that policy to really support how we're using it in the field, but also be able to maintain the value and the flexibility of CSS. So we didn't want to make changes that impacted just kind of the core purpose and strategies that were part of what we were doing, but we wanted to enhance what the service was and how we were implementing it. Consistency in terms of how we implemented across the state was really important, and then to develop that more practical, pragmatic guidance and tools for our FRS team, as well as having a place where we could house all this that was a good fit and easy to find for our VR team. We wanted to look at also in terms of how we were structuring things with CSS, both in terms of how we did like the definitions and the rate structure and the development of some of the more nuanced steps and documentation that came out of the work of the work group. Was one of the things that priorities around that was being able to better tell the story of how we were using CSS. And that meant being really effective at how we documented the services that were being used. And you'll see with some of the changes that we made, we've gone from like one generic CSS code to 3 different codes. So we have a code now for assessment and for the service delivery and for the final report that we do. And again, that will allow us when we look through where to track it, we'll be able to better capture outcomes and tell the story of the return on investment that the service is able to provide for our consumers and the work that we do. And then lastly, one of the things that we really wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that despite the fact that CSS is looking at things in non-vocational areas, we wanted to reinforce the fact that this is all about employment. These are the skills that we can support people with developing more fluency and proficiency around that will impact them and their ability to find and maintain and grow in their careers with DARS and achieve that intended outcome, right, of competitive integrated employment, self-sufficiency, and a high quality of life and maximum independence in the community. Next slide, please. So, real quick, just some guidance I'm going to share with you. And do note, what I'm sharing is more of kind of the macro level. I'm just setting the table, and you're going to have a chance to hear in more detail as well as some case examples from Ashley Miller and Sherrina Sewell a little bit later on. So they get to bring that perspective they have from, the field that I think is probably most relevant and it's going to resonate with the viewers of this training most. So policy wise, for the most part, like I said, we really wanted to maintain the core elements and scope and strategies that have always been a part of CSS, but we wanted to build in more structure. So, in terms of how we can use it and when we can use it across kind of the timeline of starting from when somebody comes to DARS to when they've achieved a stability and a vocational career of their choice, and we've begun to fade out and close the case. The cool thing with CSS is it's one of those kind of services that it's all about kind of the solutions focused, right? We can use it when it's needed and it can be individualized both in terms of context and the individual user we're working with. So we can use it to establish eligibility, access rehab, and career needs, or to achieve and maintain an employment goal as established on a individualized plan for employment. Secondly, it's continues to be a service that we want to ensure that it's provided individually to the consumers. One of the changes that we have made is we've been more explicit at defining it as a service that's provided by our ESOs. And then also ensuring that as we set up vendors for the service, that we're really kind of following the intended vendor audience and service array. So CSS does not, moving forward, it will not include other clinical or therapeutic services or behavioral health interventions or even more comprehensive program models that might address skills training but are maybe group and based in modality and not community or individualized. Okay. And then the last thing I want to point out is service areas, and this is another one of our changes, should align with and address participant needs as it's related to their DARS functional limitations. This was something early on as a team that we felt like was going to be really important, is to have a very clear foundation, kind of that anchor in terms of what is it that is going to really drive and inform how we design interventions, and then how do we document them? And we felt as a team, because again, this is all very centric to supporting somebody with having maximum benefit from services and achieving those vocational goals, that grounding it in those areas of functional limitations that we use to establish a consumer's eligibility made the most sense. Next slide, please. Mentioned this already, but just real quick, want to bring your attention to, and these are some core themes as you think about CSS, and the more you use it, that I think you'll become really familiarized with. But it is an intensive one-to-one service. It's individualized to meet the participant specific needs. So as you'll see, some of the changes we made include the development of some standardized documentation, assessments, and reports that are part of the process. And while we created that that standardization for the consistency, we continue to emphasize that there's structure within, or there's flexibility within that box to take CSS and implement, monitor, and deliver it, right, in a way that's individualized to the context and the individual's needs. Um, Going to repeat this, and you might hear this 3 more times before the training's done, but areas to be addressed through CSS should be related to an individual's significant functional limitations. Fourth bullet here, services include comprehensive community services assessment, and then an individualized CSS plan. I just had mentioned this a couple bullets ago in terms of some of the standardized tools that we talked about, and you're going to learn a lot more about those, and also you'll gain insight into what I mean when I say that. Yeah, we've got this kind of structured, standardized process and protocol in terms of some of the tools and the forms that we're using, but we're still able to make it a very individualized service for folks. Ashley's going to do some case examples later on that highlight that. And then lastly, it's provided on a short-term basis with frequency and intensity of service and fading as skills are developed. Very similar to how we approach supported job coaching and supported employment services.